Was Tupac living by the Machiavellian code? 5 lessons he lived and died by. They called him a rapper, a thug, a criminal. But when Tupac Shakur entered that prison cell in 1995, he wasn't a rapper anymore. He was a man stripped of everything. Fame, freedom, friends. Alone with his thoughts, surrounded by concrete and silence. Tupac began to read, and what he read changed him. Among those books was one written nearly 500 years earlier by another man who had fallen from grace. A man condemned by his own government, accused of treason, tortured, and exiled. His name was Niccolò Machiavelli. Tupac saw something in Machiavelli that the world never did. Others saw a manipulator, a schemer, a symbol of ruthless power. But Tupac saw the truth. Machiavelli wasn't teaching cruelty. He was teaching survival. When he walked out of prison, Tupac wasn't just free, he was reborn. He called himself Makaveli, not as an alias, but as a warning. Machiavelli had written that a true leader must sometimes learn how not to be good. Tupac understood that line better than most, because in a world designed to destroy young black men, innocence was never protection. To survive, you had to become what the world feared. Not because you were evil, but because that fear was your armor. Tupac transformed that lesson into art, into prophecy. His music after prison wasn't just rap, it was strategy. Every lyric was a move, every silence a calculation, every outburst a performance of power. He was no longer just fighting rivals, he was playing the game. And every great player in history has studied the same rules Machiavelli wrote in The Prince. But here's the part they don't tell you. Machiavelli's book was never meant for princes born to power. It was written for those clawing their way toward it, for the ones denied it, the ones fighting from the shadows. And that's why Tupac saw himself in Machiavelli. Both men were hunted by their own societies. Both turned exile into strategy. Both used words as weapons. This video isn't just about a rapper and a philosopher. It's about what happens when survival becomes a philosophy, and when power itself becomes an art form. Machiavelli Lesson 1. They say survival is instinct, but Machiavelli, and later Tupac, knew it was something else. Survival is a strategy. Most people think survival is what you do when you're desperate, when you've got no choice. But for Machiavelli, survival was an art, a calculation. He wrote, "A wise man does at once what a fool does at last," meaning hesitation kills. Waiting for permission kills. Only fools wait for the right moment. The wise create it. Tupac understood that before he ever opened The Prince. Every verse he wrote, every feud he walked into, every risk he took, it wasn't random chaos. It was speed, precision, control. The ability to act before anyone even realized what was happening. Because power doesn't come to those who wait. It comes to those who strike before the world can even name what they're doing. That's why Machiavelli warned, "Fortune is like a woman. If you wish to master her, you must conquer her by force." A harsh metaphor, but in both men's worlds, the message was the same. Fortune doesn't reward the hesitant. It rewards the dangerous. Tupac moved through life as if every moment could be his last, and that's exactly what made him unstoppable. While others chased comfort, he chased control. While others played for sympathy, he played for legacy. And he played by Machiavelli's rules. It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. When Machiavelli wrote that, he wasn't glorifying cruelty. he was describing physics. Love fades, fear stays. Tupac knew this truth too well. He had watched love turn to betrayal, loyalty rot into envy. So he stopped trying to be loved and started demanding to be remembered. That's why every performance felt like prophecy. Every glare, every silence, every explosion of rage wasn't weakness. It was theater, strategy, command, just as Machiavelli taught us all. Because Machiavelli said, "He who wishes to be obeyed must know how to command." And Tupac didn't command with titles or power. He commanded with conviction, with presence. He made people believe even when they didn't want to. That's not charisma, that's control. And the men who master that control become untouchable. Because the first rule of power, the one they never teach you, is this: if you want to survive, you must learn to move in both light and shadow. The weak hide in one, the wise rule in both. Machiavelli Lesson 2. Everyone plays a part, but the trick is knowing when the play begins, and when it never ends. Machiavelli warned, men are so simple and so subject to present necessities that he who seeks to deceive will always find someone who will let himself be deceived. He wasn't just talking about politics, he was describing human nature. People crave illusion more than truth. They would rather be comforted by lies than confronted by reality. Tupac learned this early. In the streets, in the studios, in the spotlight, he saw how people changed faces when power entered the room. One face for loyalty, another for envy, another for survival. He understood that the world rewards the best actors, not the most honest, not the kindest, the ones who wear the right mask at the right moment. So he learned to wear his own, the thug, the prophet, the poet, the enemy. Each one true, each one false. Because Machiavelli taught him that sometimes the only way to survive a world of deception is to master it. Machiavelli wrote, "The promise given was a necessity of the past. The word broken is a necessity of the present." To him, loyalty was fluid, not treachery, logic. Tupac saw the same law at work in the industry and on the streets. Yesterday's friend could become tomorrow's rival. Yesterday's ally could sell you out for survival. And nowhere did he play that game more ruthlessly than after his release from prison. When he joined Death Row Records, the world saw a new Tupac. Louder, angrier, untouchable. He unleashed Hit 'Em Up, the most infamous diss track in rap history, declaring war on the East Coast and his former allies. He never saw that as cynicism, he saw it as realism. So he drew on Machiavelli's teachings to guide his actions. In a world where everyone wears a mask, truth becomes a weapon you use sparingly. You don't tell people who you are, you let them guess. You don't reveal your plans, you let them assume. Because assumption is the easiest form of control. That is why Machiavelli said, "Never attempt to win by force what can be won by deception. Force is loud, it invites resistance. Deception is silent. It disarms before anyone knows a war has begun." Tupac used words the way Machiavelli used power. He spoke truth, but wrapped it in theater. He confessed, but he never exposed. He made people feel they understood him, even when no one did. Trust no mask, because behind every smile there is strategy. Behind every alliance, calculation, and behind every betrayal, a lesson. Machiavelli Lesson 3. Machiavelli once wrote, "The lion cannot protect itself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves." One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps and a lion to frighten wolves. To survive, you need both, the mind of the fox and the heart of the lion. Tupac lived that balance. The lion was his rage, his courage, his refusal to bow. The fox was his mind, the strategist behind every line, every headline, every silence that made the world lean in closer. They tried to bury me, but they didn't know I was a seed. That quote became Tupac's prophecy, because rebirth was never luck, it was design. When he walked out of prison, the old Tupac, the idealist, the romantic, had died. What rose in his place was Makaveli, a new mask, but also a new form of control. He didn't just return to the stage, he returned as an idea too dangerous to ignore. On the Don Killuminati, the 7-Day Theory, the album he recorded after prison, Tupac wrapped himself in fire and prophecy. He spoke of death as if it was already done. He blurred the line between man and myth, and through that he did what few ever achieve. He made his mortality part of his message. Machiavelli had taught him that destruction can be a tool of creation, that sometimes, to preserve power, one must destroy the version of himself that others think they know. Tupac understood. He knew he couldn't control how the world judged him alive, so he began controlling how it would remember him dead. And when death finally came, it felt less like an ending and more like execution of a plan. Theories still whisper that he faked it, that he staged his own disappearance, like Machiavelli himself, who was rumored to have done the same after exile. But maybe that's the point. Maybe power isn't about being alive. Maybe it's about being unforgettable. Because the lion fights to live, the fox plans to live forever. Tupac was both, and that's why his story didn't end with his death. It began there. Machiavelli lesson number 4. They say the truth will set you free, but Machiavelli and Tupac knew that truth doesn't free men, it exposes them. Machiavelli wrote, "The great majority of mankind are satisfied with appearances as though they were realities. Most people don't want truth. They want the comfort of believing they already have it. So the man who speaks truth becomes dangerous, not because he lies, but because he breaks the illusion others depend on." Tupac lived that danger every time he opened his mouth. He didn't rap about fantasies, he spoke about the system, about poverty, corruption, racism, and the politics of fear. He said what others only whispered, and for that he became both prophet and target. His interviews were confessionals disguised as confrontations. He talked about police brutality, about the hypocrisy of politicians, about the illusion of peace built on oppression. He was raw, unfiltered, and unafraid, and that terrified people. Because a man who isn't afraid to speak the truth cannot be controlled. Machiavelli warned rulers about such men. He wrote, "A prince must never lack legitimate reasons to break his promise." He meant that power bends truth, that every system finds ways to justify betrayal, to make lies look noble. Tupac saw it too. He saw how the same institutions that praise justice turn blind when that justice threatened their comfort. He watched as truth-tellers were buried under scandals, noise, and propaganda, until silence became safety. But Tupac refused silence. He used truth like fire, not to warm, but to burn. He understood that truth alone is useless unless it unsettles. That's why when he spoke, his words carried that strange tension. Part confession, part warning, part declaration of war. He once said, "I'm not saying I'm going to change the world, but I guarantee that I will spark the brain that will change the world." That line wasn't hope, it was prediction. Because truth once spoken, cannot die. It only moves from one mind to another until it becomes unstoppable. Machiavelli wrote, "It is not titles that honor men, but men that honor titles." Tupac lived that. He didn't wait for crowns or validation. He made his own. And through that defiance, he proved that truth, when wielded with conviction, isn't weakness. It's power in its purest, most dangerous form. Because a lie rules the present, but the truth rules forever. Machiavelli Lesson 5. They can kill the body, but never the idea. That was Machiavelli's secret, and Tupac's obsession. Because both men understood, power fades, but memory is eternal. Machiavelli wrote, "He who becomes master of a city accustomed to freedom and does not destroy it will be destroyed by it." He was warning rulers about half measures, about trying to control a world without fully reshaping it. Tupac understood that lesson. He knew you can't fight a system halfway. You either rewrite it or it erases you. That's why he stopped trying to fit into the music industry. He started building his own mythology instead. When he renamed himself Makaveli, he wasn't hiding behind a new identity. He was reprogramming how people would remember him. He turned his life into a message, one that could outlive his body. On the Don Killuminati, the 7-day theory recorded just months before his death, Tupac filled every lyric with foreshadowing. He spoke about betrayal, resurrection, and fate chasing him through every shadow. He filmed the video for "I Ain't Mad at Ya," and in it he dies and comes back as a spirit watching the world go on without him. A few weeks later, that scene became real. That wasn't coincidence. It was choreography. He was scripting his afterlife before the world even knew it was coming. That's why, when he died, the legend didn't die with him. It multiplied. He had already planted the seeds. He knew what Machiavelli had written centuries earlier, that the wise man does not rely on chance, he makes it. And that's exactly what Tupac did. He made his own fate, his own prophecy, his own rebirth. Every artist who came after him still speaks his name. Kendrick Lamar, J. Cole, Nipsey Hussle. The list goes on. Every generation rediscovers his words as if they were written yesterday. That is not survival. That is strategy. Machiavelli believed the greatest rulers were not those who lived the longest, but those whose ideas outlived their enemies. Tupac believed the same. He once said, "I'm not saying I'm going to change the world, but I guarantee that I will spark the brain that will change the world." He knew that even if he fell, his words would keep moving like embers carried by wind. And they did. That's why even now, decades later, his ghost still walks in lyrics, in protests, in movements for truth and resistance. He turned pain into permanence. That is the ultimate Machiavellian victory. Not to win the moment, but to control the memory. Because men die, but the stories they design for themselves don't. Tupac didn't just live, he constructed his legend. And that Machiavellian legend still rules. If this hit you, don't let it vanish into the scroll. Hit like so the algorithm knows men like you still exist. Subscribe for more forbidden strategy. And remember, the man who plays like Tupac wins everything. Until next time.